We're standing on the north bank of the River Thames. That, of course, is Tower Bridge, and we're stood near London Bridge. If we turn round, we can see this, the monument to the Great Fire of London, 1666. We're actually stood next to the Church of St Magnus, London Bridge, and this church was one of the first buildings to be destroyed by that fire. There was a church here before the arrival of the Normans. It was dedicated to St Magnus. But who was St Magnus? The present patron is St Magnus of Orkney, but he did not die until 1116. So it must be that the church was originally dedicated to another St Magnus, probably St Magnus, Bishop of Caesarea, who was martyred in AD 276. So let's just turn ourselves round and go and look at the church. And the first thing we find is that there is a choir practice in progress. We were, of course, very quiet and very unobtrusive. In the 1920s, a three-decker pulpit was dismantled to rediscover this elegant pulpit of Wren. Wren had, of course, rebuilt the church after the Great Fire. In a moment we'll catch a glimpse of St Magnus, see if you can spot him. This church was alongside the entrance to the old London Bridge. That's the one with all the buildings along it, if you remember, and they have a model of it here. Just hold tight now. In 1640, that's about 26 years before the Great Fire, this church had a miraculous escape when this old London Bridge burnt down. I had read about London Bridge and all the buildings on it, but to see it in a scale model like this is very interesting. The new bridge which replaced it was a lot wider, and they had to open up a passageway going underneath the church tower to enable pedestrian access to the bridge. We'll have a look at this later. Another of those old London parishes, called St Margaret, New Fish Street, was amalgamated with St Magnus and its church, not rebuilt after the Great Fire. This church is the final resting place of, amongst others, Henry Eveley, the master mason whose work we saw at Canterbury Cathedral, and Miles Coverdale, who oversaw the publication of the first complete Bible in English, 1535. We're now stood at the east end of the church. The river flows along the length of the church to our left. We've now come round to the west end of the church, and we'll see here that that looks like the front, and that would be alongside the road that approached the bridge. And we can see the pedestrian approach to the bridge running underneath the tower. If we turn round now to our right, we can see an even newer bridge which replaced that after the Second World War. This must have been built slightly further upstream because they've managed to fit in an office block in between.